It wasn't until the day we finally met in person that I realized my online boyfriend was Mute. The boy sat across from me in the dim booth of the local indie coffee shop, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. His face was entirely devoid of color, a stark contrast to the bright, bubbly personality he had displayed over text for the past 2 months. He pushed a small blue post-it note across the wooden table, his eyes darting down, utterly unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at his face, and the bizarre, glowing text that had suddenly begun drifting across the air right above his head. "LMAO, Wes is a menace. He literally set up his own twin brother just to get back at Riley. This is wild. He's playing both the female lead and his own brother like absolute fools." I blinked, my brain working quickly to piece together the floating words. Today was supposed to be the day I finally met my online boyfriend. Over the summer, out of sheer boredom, I'd matched with a guy who was incredibly witty, charming, and easy to talk to. We fell into a comfortable, flirty online relationship. He told me he was transferring to my university in the fall and promised we'd meet up as soon as he arrived. But once orientation week ended, he kept making excuses, dragging his feet every time I suggested getting a drink. It wasn't until I threatened to block him and move on that he finally agreed to this date. The floating text continued to scroll across my vision, and the puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. The female lead, the comments were referring to, was my roommate, Penelope, and the male lead was Weston Prescott, the newly transferred star athlete of our university's soccer team, who also happened to be Penelope's childhood best friend. The boy sitting in front of me, trembling in his vintage denim jacket, was Weston's identical twin brother, Wyatt. I didn't know what minor grievance had driven Penelope to orchestrate this. Maybe it was because right before summer break, I'd snapped at her for leaving her rotting takeout boxes in our shared kitchen. Whatever the reason, her little revenge plot with Weston was laughably pathetic. Did they honestly think matching me with a mute boy would utterly humiliate me? Looking at the boy across from me, I had to actively press my lips together to keep from laughing out loud. A mute boyfriend? That was actually perfect. He couldn't talk back, couldn't argue, and would probably blush at every single thing I said. How incredibly endearing. My prolonged silence only made him more anxious. Wyatt slid the blue slip of paper back toward himself, his shoulders slumping. He stood up, his movements stiff and awkward, and offered a small, polite bow of apology before turning to leave. I reached out and caught his wrist. His skin was warm, his pulse fluttering rapidly under my fingers. He froze, his lips pressed into a tight line. The outer corners of his eyes flushed a soft, bruised pink. "I'm not disappointed, baby," I murmured, my voice soft. "Why would I ever be disappointed in you?" He clearly hadn't expected the pet name. A crimson flush bloomed from his collarbone, racing up his neck to the very tips of his ears. Still, he sat back down, completely compliant. He pulled out his pen, his hands shaking slightly as he wrote on a fresh slip of paper. "Really? But I can't speak. I'm sorry." He kept his head low, sliding the note over, his long eyelashes casting shadows on his cheekbones. I leaned my chin on my hand, smiling at him. The invisible chat logs above his head erupted. "Wait, what is she doing? Isn't the rejected girl supposed to scream at him for lying, throw her coffee and storm out? Yeah, and then she's supposed to run into the hot, perfectly healthy brother on campus, beg him to notice her, and get publicly humiliated so Penelope can laugh. Why is the script going off the rails?" Wyatt's handwriting was beautiful, elegant and precise. He watched my face with a quiet, desperate intensity, as if he expected me to grow disgusted at any second and leave him behind. I picked up the blue sticky note, folded it neatly into a little origami heart, and slid it back into his palm. "Hey, boyfriend," I said, my voice dropping to a teasing whisper. "Do you actually know what people are supposed to do when they finally meet in person after dating online?" Wyatt blinked, looking down at the paper heart in his palm. He picked up his pen again. I looked it up online. It said we should go to a movie. I sighed softly, reaching across the table to cup his face. His skin was incredibly soft, and up close, his features were breathtaking. My heart did a sudden, violent flip. Who cared about a movie? "Put the pen down," I whispered. "Meeting in person is for kissing and holding each other. It's not a study hall." Wyatt went entirely rigid. Earlier, I'd been annoyed that the cafe staff had seated us in this secluded, high-walled booth in the back corner. But now, I wanted to leave them a massive tip. My gorgeous little mute boyfriend couldn't speak, but he was incredibly sweet. He was clumsy at it, he didn't know how to pace his breathing, and he kept his eyes wide open, staring at me in sheer wonder. I had to hand it to Weston Prescott. He had sent me an absolute treasure. Before we left the cafe, I gently took Wyatt's phone from his hand. "Let me see our chat. I want to look through our old messages." When I opened the thread, a wave of irritation washed over me. Weston's performance as an online boyfriend had been incredibly lazy. His texts consisted of nothing but "good morning," "have you eaten," and "going to sleep." And Wyatt, completely oblivious to the fact that his brother was using him as a pawn, had responded to every single dry text with adorable, customized little rabbit emojis. I opened the contact settings, deleted the old number, and added my actual personal line. I got a new number, I told him, dropping the phone back into his hand. Use this one from now on. Wyatt still looked dazed, his lips slightly swollen and dark, his eyes carrying a soft, watery sheen. Looking at how beautifully ruined he looked after a simple kiss, my chest tightened with a strange, possessive thrill. I leaned in close, pressing my cheek against his, and snapped a quick selfie before he could protest. Wyatt walked me to the bus stop, turning back to look at me every 3 steps. He was still clutching that little blue paper heart, like it was made of solid gold. I hummed a song all the way back to my apartment, utterly delighted by my stroke of good luck. As soon as I sat on my bed, my phone buzzed. The contact name Baby, which I hadn't changed yet, flashed on the screen. It was Weston, obviously texting from the burner account he'd used to catfish me. Are you satisfied with my performance today? He had probably just gotten home and was eager to hear how much of a fool I'd made of myself. I opened my camera roll and selected the selfie I'd just taken with Wyatt. Wyatt's eyes were glassy, his lips flushed and parted, his hair beautifully mussed from where my fingers had tangled in it. I hit send, adding a quick text. I like you even more in person, baby. But next time we kiss, try not to tremble so much. It'll make things easier. The floating text in the air above my desk filled with a long string of ellipses. Holy hell, this girl is savage. Wes is probably turning green right now. The golden boy wanted to humiliate her, and instead his innocent little brother got absolutely devoured. To be honest, with the exact same face, Wyatt is so much cuter and sweeter. If he weren't mute, he'd easily be the campus heartthrob. It took a long, agonizingly quiet 10 minutes before a reply finally popped up on my screen. I didn't do well today. Let's meet again tomorrow. Same time. I curved my lips into a cold smile but didn't reply. The chat comments in the air were equally baffled. What is Wes doing now? Is he going to play the mute brother again? Or is he going to show up himself? I think he's losing his mind. Why is he staring at that photo like he wants to tear it apart? He's literally zooming in on her face. He's probably memorizing her features so he can destroy her tomorrow. I scoffed, opening Weston's contact info. I deleted the name Baby and changed it to The Jerk. Then, I tapped into my actual chat with Wyatt, the real account we'd just set up. Did you make it home safe, baby? He replied instantly with a rabbit nodding emoji, followed by the blinking text. Typing? I waited patiently, watching the little bubbles dance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of hesitation, a message appeared. Baby, I'm home? He was so nervous he'd accidentally added a question mark at the end. I laughed out loud, rolling over on my mattress. He quickly deleted the message, replacing it with a simple, I'm home. I didn't let him hide. I hit the FaceTime button. He answered on the very first ring, his face flushing a deep, lovely pink the moment my screen connected. I saw the first text before you deleted it, Wyatt. I teased, leaning close to the camera. Can you call me baby again? The screen went silent. Wyatt's eyes dimmed slightly, a quiet vulnerability flickering in his gaze. I immediately realized my mistake. He couldn't speak, and asking him to say it was a thoughtless slip. I had a really good time today, I said quickly, changing the subject and pressing my face closer to the lens. Did you? On the screen, the boy's shy, beautiful smile returned. He nodded eagerly, looking exactly like his favorite rabbit emoji. He was so incredibly precious. For the next 2 hours, we stayed on the call. Wyatt couldn't talk, so he simply sat at his desk, his chin resting on his hand, watching me talk about my day. His eyes were wide and clear, reflecting the light of his screen like a pair of quiet, brilliant stars. There was a strange, deep sense of familiarity in the way he looked at me. But before I could search my memory to place it, a sharp knock sounded on his bedroom door. Wyatt jumped, his posture instantly stiffening. He pointed toward his door, his eyes wide with sudden apprehension. Kiss me through the screen before you go, I whispered. Wyatt froze, his ears turning bright red. But before he could move, a cold, sharp voice echoed from the other side of his door. Wyatt, who are you talking to in there? Without waiting for an answer, the door swung open. Wyatt scrambled to shove his phone into his pocket, but the call was still active. I kept the volume high, pressing my ear to the speaker. Where did you go today? Weston's voice was smooth, but it carried an icy, condescending edge. There was a long silence. I assumed Wyatt was using sign language, or simply keeping his head down. You shouldn't trust girls you meet on the internet, Weston continued, his tone dripping with a quiet, toxic pity. Especially not with your condition. Did she actually look at you without being disgusted? Wyatt, don't go wishing for things you don't deserve. My smile completely vanished. The screen stayed dark, but the raw arrogance in Weston's voice made my blood boil. A moment later, the screen lit up again. Wyatt's face appeared, pale and strained, though he tried to offer me a reassuring smile. My eyes hardened. I tapped out of our FaceTime call and opened my chat with The Jerk. Sure, I wrote back. Let's meet tomorrow. When I finally hung up with Wyatt, he looked exhausted. I didn't push him for another kiss. Instead, I blew him a soft kiss through the camera. I really, really like you, Wyatt. You're perfect just the way you are. Seriously. Can't wait to see you again. I watched his eyes light up with a sudden, brilliant warmth before the screen went black. The next day, I made Weston wait. I arrived at our meeting spot, a completely unsheltered plaza under the blistering midday sun, exactly 3 hours late. Weston was standing by the concrete steps, looking slightly wilted from the heat. The moment he saw me, his eyes flared with a desperate, almost manic intensity. He took 2 long strides toward me. Sonny, the name caught in his throat, and my brows furrowed. Sonny. That was the nickname I had used back in middle school, before my parents divorced and I moved away, legally changing my name to Riley. How did Weston Prescott know that? I searched my memory, trying to find any trace of him from my childhood, but came up entirely empty. Seeing my cold, questioning stare, his confident smile faltered. He realized he'd made a slip. I thought you couldn't talk yesterday? I asked, my voice laced with deliberate contempt. Weston swallowed hard, his voice dropping to a soft, pleading murmur. It's a psychological issue. It comes and goes. I stared at him, watching him spin his lie. Above his head, the floating comments were losing their minds. Wait, what is happening? Why does Wes look like a kicked puppy? He's supposed to be ruining her life, not begging for her attention. Is he seriously trying to steal his brother's identity now? This is a train wreck. I'm so confused. Did he actually fall for her? This is supposed to be Penelope's revenge plot. Even though Weston shared his brother's exact face, he didn't look nearly as handsome to me. His eyes lacked that quiet, luminous clarity. His posture carried an arrogant edge that made my skin crawl. And every time he spoke, I could only hear the cruel, mocking voice from Wyatt's bedroom last night. With your condition, don't go wishing for things you don't deserve. Do me a favor, I interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. Can you stop talking? Your voice is incredibly grating. I liked you a lot better yesterday when you were quiet. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The color completely drained from Weston's face. Okay, he whispered after a long pause, his throat bobbing as he swallowed his pride. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he began typing. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a shared document, a meticulously planned itinerary for a perfect day out. The invisible text above him updated in real time. No way. Wes spent all of last night researching the perfect date spots. So he let his brother act as his proxy yesterday, and now he's acting as his brother's proxy today? The irony is delicious. He's completely whipped. I don't think he even remembers who Penelope is at this point. I offered a dry nod of approval. Weston reached out, his fingers hovering near mine as if to hold my hand, but I pulled away sharply, my expression cold. I don't like guys who are that forward, I said. You're acting incredibly cheap. You weren't like this yesterday. His hand froze in the air, his fingers curling inward as he slowly pulled back. For the next 3 hours, I made his life an absolute living hell. When he bought me lunch, I pushed the plate away with a look of utter disgust. Your taste is terrible. Yesterday you picked much better options. When he ordered us drinks, I rolled my eyes. I literally told you yesterday that I'm on my period. Do you have a memory deficit? How can you be this stupid? Every time he flinched, a small, dark spark of satisfaction flared in my chest. I leaned in, continuing to chip away at his pride. Yesterday, I thought you were the most attractive guy I'd ever seen. Today, aside from your face, you're incredibly disappointing. Weston stood there, taking every hit in silence, a quiet, I'm sorry slipping from his lips. The arrogant, untouchable star athlete was entirely gone, replaced by a boy desperately trying to please someone who despised him. But the more I looked at his face, the more I missed Wyatt's soft, starry eyes. Finally, after making Weston stand in a bakery queue for over an hour to get a specific strawberry tart, I glanced at my phone and sighed. I don't want it anymore. I'm going home. He stared at me, the white bakery box held tightly in his hands. He took a step forward, his fingers catching the very edge of my sleeve. But we haven't even had a real conversation today, he said, his voice barely a whisper, his chest rising and falling rapidly. And you didn't. He stopped, his ears turning a bright, furious red. You said yesterday that you'd kiss me again today. I stared at him in sheer disbelief, and the floating chat above us went wild. Oh my God, Wes, have some self-respect. Is he seriously begging for the kiss his brother got? This is tragic. So he told his brother to stay away, only so he could slide into his place? That's low. A wave of intense revulsion washed over me. I didn't bother hiding my disgust anymore. Let me be completely honest with you, I said, stepping back so his fingers slipped off my sleeve. He looked up, his eyes wide and vulnerable. Before today, I actually liked you, I said, my voice dripping with cold indifference. Especially yesterday. I was completely crazy about you. I didn't even want to let you go. The flush on his cheeks faded, leaving his face a stark, fragile white. But today's version of you? Honestly. I let out a harsh, mocking laugh. You're pathetic. You're not half as attractive as you were yesterday, and your personality is exhausting. You don't even compare to the guy I met first. Weston stood completely still under the harsh afternoon sun, looking like a piece of fine porcelain that had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. I pulled out my phone, opened our chat, and blocked him right in front of his face. Let's not do this again. We're done. Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked away, never once looking back. My phone buzzed in my hand. I ignored the chaotic chatter of the floating comments and dialed Wyatt's number. The moment the screen connected, his face appeared, his eyes immediately lighting up like a pair of lanterns in the dark. My sour mood evaporated instantly. What are you doing, baby? Did you miss me? Wyatt held up a thick textbook, bringing it close to the camera so I could see the cover, before lowering his head to write on a fresh post-it. Reading. And yes, I missed you. The rain had stopped by 7 that evening, leaving the campus sidewalks slick, with fallen yellow ginkgo leaves that smelled of damp autumn and crushed cedar. I sat at the corner table of the university library's 3rd floor, the secluded section where the architecture monographs and heavy botanical folios were kept. Wyatt sat opposite me, his vintage denim jacket draped over the back of his wooden chair. He was wearing a cream-colored knit sweater with cuffs that swallowed half his knuckles, his dark hair falling in soft, untidy waves across his brow as he sketched. He wasn't reading his textbook anymore. He was drawing on a pad of rough watercolor paper with a 2B graphite pencil. I leaned my chin in my hand, tapping the wooden surface between us with the tip of my ballpoint pen. What are you drawing, baby? Wyatt's hand hitched. A soft, rosy flush bloomed at the base of his throat, creeping up behind his delicate ears. Without raising his head, he carefully turned the sketchbook toward me. It was a drawing of me from 2 minutes ago. Chin resting on my palm, my oversized flannel slipping off one shoulder, the amber glow of the library sconce catching the curl of my eyelashes. In the lower right corner, instead of a signature, he had drawn a small, round rabbit holding a single daisy. Above his head, the glowing, translucent text scrolled into my vision, luminous against the dark oak bookshelves. Look at the line work. Wyatt is actually a genius-level illustrator in the original novel lore, but his parents hid all his sketchbooks because they thought art was a waste for a defective son. I'm crying. He drew the little rabbit again. He's been drawing that same rabbit signature since middle school. Wait until Riley finds out who actually made that wooden rabbit pendant she keeps on her keychain. My breath caught slightly. My fingers instinctively went to the zipper of my backpack, where a small, smoothed-down wooden carving of a lop-eared rabbit hung from a brass ring. It was worn at the edges, the varnish faded from years of me rubbing it between my thumb and forefinger whenever I felt anxious. I had found it in my school locker on the last day of 7th grade, wrapped in brown butcher paper with no name, only a note that said, "Don't cry. You're Sunny." I looked up from the drawing into Wyatt's wide, luminous hazel eyes. He watched me with that familiar, breath-held stillness, like a fawn waiting to see if the hand reaching out held grain or an arrow. "Do you know," I murmured, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry past the stack of art history folios, "you're far too good to me." Wyatt shook his head quickly. He grabbed a fresh blue post-it from his pocket, his pencil moving in swift, elegant strokes. "I am not good enough, but I want to try." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. His fingers were cool from the autumn draft, but they instantly softened beneath my palm, his thumb turning upward to rest against my inner wrist, feeling my pulse. "Tomorrow is the campus club fair," I said softly. "The fine arts department is holding an open exhibition in the main pavilion. I want you to enter this." Wyatt froze. His eyes dilated with sudden, genuine panic. He pulled a note toward himself, writing rapidly. "No, I can't. Weston's team is hosting the athletic showcase in the pavilion next door. Our parents will be there. They don't like me being in public events." The anger that flared in my stomach was hot and sharp. I thought of the cruel, casual dismissal in Weston's voice through the phone the night before. "Don't go. Wishing for things you don't deserve." And the floating comments that treated Wyatt's existence like a tragic subplot designed only to highlight the golden boy's shine. "Wyatt," I said, leaning closer until the scent of his sandalwood soap filled the narrow space between us. "Do you trust me?" He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. He didn't hesitate. He nodded once, a firm, decisive dip of his chin. "Then tomorrow," I whispered, pressing my lips to the knuckles of his drawing hand, "we play by my rules." When I returned to my apartment at 9 o'clock, Penelope was sitting on the beige velvet couch in the living room, a sheet mask smoothed over her face and her bare feet propped on our glass coffee table. Beside her, a half-eaten container of spicy takeout noodles sat open, leaking grease onto my fresh issue of Architectural Digest. "You're home late," Penelope said, her voice muffled through the wet fabric of the mask. She didn't look up from her phone, but her thumbs were flying across the screen. Wes told me you went crazy at the plaza today. What did you do to him, Riley? He looked like someone ran over his dog. I kicked off my sneakers by the door and walked into the kitchen, picking up a paper towel to remove her greasy takeout box from my magazine. I threw the box straight into the trash can with a loud metallic thunk. Your childhood best friend has terrible taste in pastry, and an even worse personality, I said mildly, leaning against the counter. I simply informed him of the facts. Penelope pulled the sheet mask from her face, balling it up and tossing it onto the table. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows were knit in deep irritation. He was trying to be nice to you, she snapped, crossing her arms. You've always been like this, Riley, so defensive, so aggressive over every little thing. Wes is the captain of the soccer team. Half the girls in our year would kill for him to spend an entire afternoon buying them tarts, and you treated him like garbage. Above her head, the floating text flared to life in sharp magenta. Penelope is so mad because Wes was supposed to break Riley's heart and post the audio of her crying to the team group chat. She doesn't know Wes is currently sitting in his car outside their dorm, looking at Riley's blocked contact card. Like a lunatic. The script is so broken, guys. Penelope thinks she's the mastermind, but she's just an unpaid extra at this point. I smiled, a slow, razor-thin smile that made Penelope's posture stiffen in defensive unease. If you want him so badly, Penelope, you're welcome to have him, I said, pouring myself a glass of cold water. Though from what I hear, he doesn't seem particularly interested in you, does he? Otherwise, why would he spend all summer pretending to be an online stranger just to talk to me? Penelope's face went completely crimson. She shot to her feet, her manicured nails digging into her palms. He did that for me. Because you insulted my family during orientation week. I told you not to leave your dirty underwear on the bathroom radiator. Penelope, if you consider basic hygiene an attack on your family honor, that explains why your standards for men are so bottom tier. You save your breath, I interrupted, setting my glass down on the counter with a sharp, ringing click. And clear your junk off the table before midnight. If it's still there when I wake up, it goes into the dumpster. I turned my back on her and walked into my bedroom, clicking the deadbolt into place. Through the thin wood of the door, I could hear her furiously dialing a number. On speakerphone. Wes, she's completely insane. You have to put her in her place tomorrow at the festival. What do you mean? Leave her alone. Wes, are you listening to me? The call disconnected with a sharp beep. I leaned against my locked door in the dark, letting out a long, quiet breath. I pulled out my phone and checked my chat with Wyatt. There was a fresh photo, a snapshot of his bedside table. Next to his lamp was the blue paper heart I had folded for him at the coffee shop, nestled safely inside a clean glass jar. Beneath it, he had sent a single emoji, a little white rabbit pulling a blanket over its ears. Good night, Sonny, his text read. My heart performed a slow, sweet, aching somersault against my ribs. He remembered. He had remembered all along. The university's autumn festival turned the central quad into a labyrinth of white canvas tents, fairy lights, and the heavy, sweet aroma of roasted caramel, corn and spiced cider. By noon, the quad was packed with students and visiting alumni. The athletic pavilion was loud with the thumping bass of the varsity hype playlist. Large banners bearing Weston's face and jersey number hung from the rafters, celebrating the soccer team's regional championship qualification. I stood 50 yards away, beneath the high, arched glass roof of the Fine Arts Pavilion. Wyatt was standing behind a simple wooden easel in the corner booth. He looked breathtaking, his hair neatly brushed back, wearing a soft charcoal blazer over a black turtleneck that accentuated his sharp jawline and the graceful, porcelain curve of his throat. On the easel sat the finished watercolor canvas we had framed that morning. It was titled, The Garden That Learned to Wait. It was a panoramic, dreamlike rendering of our middle school courtyard during a torrential downpour. The cracked concrete, the rusted chain-link fence, and, huddled beneath the shelter of an overgrown wild rose bush, two children sharing a broken umbrella. The girl had a band-aid across her knee and tears on her cheeks. The boy was offering her a roughly carved wooden rabbit, his eyes wide and impossibly bright with silent, unwavering devotion. Within 20 minutes of the pavilion opening, a crowd of faculty members and visiting curators from the Metropolitan Arts Foundation had gathered around the corner booth. The emotional resonance in the lighting is remarkable. An elderly professor, with round tortoiseshell glasses, murmured, leaning close to the canvas. The contrast between the oppressive gray of the storm and the warmth of the miniature figure. Who is the artist? Wyatt stood beside the easel, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his breath coming in shallow, nervous intervals. He looked at me, his eyes wide with that old, ingrained terror of stepping into the light. I walked over, slipping my arm through his, feeling the sudden violent tremor in his bicep. The artist is Wyatt Prescott, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the quiet circle of onlookers. A junior in the architectural design department. Prescott? A woman in an expensive camel hair coat chimed in, turning around. Like the Prescott Holdings family? The ones sponsoring the athletic wing. Before anyone could answer, the canvas curtain at the entrance of the pavilion was pushed aside with unnecessary force. Weston stepped through. He was wearing his red varsity tracksuit, his athletic bag slung over one shoulder, a half-dozen teammates trailing behind him. His eyes scanned the room with aggressive, restless urgency until they locked onto me. Then his gaze dropped to the canvas, and then to his brother's hand, which was now firmly intertwined with mine. The floating text above the crowd exploded in a dizzying cascade of gold and crimson. Oh my God, Wes recognized the painting. That was the day Sonny's parents had their divorce hearing in court, and she hid behind the gym. Wes was playing soccer that day and told her she was being annoying, while Wyatt spent 3 hours in the rain carving that rabbit for her. Look at Weston's face. He's realizing he never had a claim on her to begin with. Weston took 3 long, aggressive strides forward, ignoring the murmurs of the professors. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with dark, furious red. What is this? Weston's voice cut through the gallery, rough and demanding. Wyatt, what the hell are you doing here? Dad told you to stay at the dorms until the alumni dinner. Wyatt's fingers tightened against mine, turning icy cold. I didn't let him retreat. I stepped forward half a pace, positioning myself between the twins, looking Weston up and down with open, cutting disdain. Your brother is an artist presenting his work at an academic exhibition. Weston, I said, each word dripping with crystalline clarity. What are you doing here? Did you get lost looking for the gym? Or did you just come to borrow someone else's accomplishments again? Riley, shut up, Weston hissed, his voice dropping to a low, desperate growl as he leaned toward me. You don't know what you're doing. He's using you to get back at me. Is he? I let out a soft, mocking laugh that drew the attention of every faculty member in the pavilion. That's funny, because from where I'm standing, you're the one who spent the summer catfishing me with his personality, begging for the affection he earned 6 years ago. A collective, sharp gasp rippled through the surrounding students. What did she just say? A girl with a camera whispered. Weston Prescott catfished someone using his brother's identity. No way, the team captain? Riley, that's enough. The voice came from the pavilion entrance. A tall, austere man in a bespoke 3-piece suit strode into the gallery, flanked by an equally immaculate woman with diamonds at her ears and Penelope trailing closely behind them like a dutiful lapdog. Arthur and Eleanor Prescott. The parents. The arrival of the Prescott patriarch brought an immediate, suffocating silence to the tent. Arthur Prescott had donated $4 million to the university's sports complex. The Dean of Fine Arts instinctively straightened his tie, looking nervous. What is the meaning of this commotion? Arthur's voice was deep, authoritarian, and thoroughly accustomed to instant obedience. His cold gaze swept over the crowd, dismissed the artwork with a single, contemptuous glance, and landed squarely on Wyatt. Wyatt, Arthur said, his tone flat and disappointed. Take that canvas down and go to the car. Your mother and I did not raise you to make a spectacle of your disability in front of our benefactors. Wyatt's head dropped. The old, familiar defeat seemed to wash over his shoulders, like a leaden weight. He reached out a trembling hand toward the easel to unhook the frame. I grabbed his wrist. Don't touch it, Wyatt, I commanded softly. Then I turned to face Arthur Prescott. Disability? I asked, my voice calm, perfectly pitched, carrying to the furthest corners of the pavilion where students were already pulling out their phones to record. Mr. Prescott, your son has produced a piece of work that two visiting fellows from the Metropolitan Foundation just described as generational talent. The only spectacle here is a father who is so intellectually blind that he mistakes his son's sensitivity for weakness. Eleanor Prescott gasped, her manicured hand flying to her throat. How dare you speak to my husband like that? Who is this girl? I'm the girl your golden boy tried to humiliate, I said, pointing a thumb at Weston, whose face was now the color of wet chalk. And I'm the girl who watched you spend 10 years burying your most talented son in the basement because you were too cowardly to admit that your favorite child is an empty, plagiarizing shell. Above Arthur's head, the floating text ran wild. Tell them, Riley. Drag the whole family. Expose the fire. Expose why Wyatt actually lost his voice. Yes. The summer house fire when they were 12. Wes left the stove on, and Wyatt inhaled toxic smoke for 20 minutes, dragging Wes out of the burning den. The parents covered it up so Wes wouldn't lose his athletic recruitment. They made Wyatt take the blame. The words hung in the air before my eyes like fiery embers. A wave of cold, murderous fury washed over my mind, sharpening every thought into a surgical blade. I looked directly into Arthur Prescott's arrogant, aristocratic eyes. 6 years ago, when the Prescott summer estate in Vermont caught fire, I said, the words dropping like heavy stones into the dead silence of the gallery, "Who dragged Weston out of the kitchen through the collapsed ceiling beams?" Arthur went entirely rigid. Eleanor let out a sharp, choked shriek. "Who spent 3 weeks in the pediatric ICU with third-degree chemical burns across his vocal cords while you hired a crisis management firm to scrub the local police reports?" I continued, taking a slow step toward the parents. "You told the press it was an accidental electrical shortage. You told the scouts that Weston was completely uninjured. And you told Wyatt to keep his mouth shut because a mute artist didn't fit into the Prescott private equity portfolio, but a star soccer recruit did." The whispers in the crowd rose into a deafening roar. "Is that true? Holy shit. He saved his brother's life and they hit him? Weston, did you actually let your brother take the fall for that?" Weston stood frozen in the center of the pavilion, his hands shaking so violently that his athletic bag slipped from his shoulder, hitting the wooden floorboards with a dull, heavy thud. "Riley, please," Weston choked out, tears finally breaking over his lower eyelids running down his pale cheeks. I never wanted them to hide him. I just wanted you to look at me the way you looked at him." "You had 6 years to tell the truth, Weston," I said, not sparing him a single drop of mercy. "You had 6 years to give him back his life. Instead you stole his drawings, you stole his nickname for me, and you tried to turn his existence into a joke to please a pathetic, spiteful roommate." I turned my head to look at Penelope, who was trying desperately to shrink behind Eleanor Prescott's coat. "As for you, Penelope," I said, my voice dropping to a dry, venomous whisper, "move your things out of my apartment by 5 o'clock. If I see a single trace of you when I return, I will submit the full audio recording of your catfishing conspiracy to the Student Conduct Board and the Academic Integrity Committee. Let's see how much your sorority loves a convicted cyberbully." Penelope burst into tears, turned on her heels, and fled from the pavilion, her high heels clattering frantically against the flagstones. Arthur Prescott took a menacing step toward me, his face purple with rage. "You insolent little..." Before his foot could touch the border of our booth, a tall, lean silhouette stepped forcefully in front of me. Wyatt. He did not tremble. He did not look at the floor. He stood with his spine as straight as an iron pillar, towering an inch over his father, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with an ancient, terrifying intensity that made the older man instinctively halt his advance. Wyatt raised his hands. With sharp, fluid, undeniable elegance, he began to sign an American sign language, his movements so fierce and powerful they had the force of physical blows. The young assistant curator from the Metropolitan Foundation, who was standing beside the easel, immediately began translating aloud in a clear, trembling voice. "You did not give me my voice, Father, and you do not have the power to take it away." Wyatt dropped his hands for a fraction of a second, then signed again, his eyes locking onto Weston. "I saved you because you were my brother, but from this day forward you are simply a stranger who shares my face." Wyatt turned his back on his family. He reached out, his hands steady, warm, and sure, and took mine. He did not look at the cameras. He did not look at the crowd that parted for us like the Red Sea. He simply led me out of the pavilion into the bright, clean autumn sunlight, leaving the entire Prescott dynasty standing in the ruins of their own manufactured golden cage. 2 months later, the first winter snow began to fall over the city. The university quad was blanketed in 6 inches of untouched, powdery white. The scandal had long since settled into its final, irrevocable shapes. Weston had resigned from the soccer captaincy and transferred to an obscure Division II college in the Midwest to escape the relentless campus mockery. Penelope had been placed on academic disciplinary probation and moved back to her parents' house, and the Prescott Foundation had been forced to establish an independent trust fund for Wyatt following an investigation by the university's Legal Ethics Board. Wyatt and I sat on the wide window seat of our new apartment, a sunny, high-ceilinged studio 3 blocks from the arts faculty, with exposed brick walls covered in his watercolor canvases and architectural prints. The small wooden rabbit carving hung from the brass latch of the window, spinning lazily in the warm draft from the floor radiator. Wyatt sat behind me, his long legs framing mine, his chin resting comfortably on the crown of my head as we shared a steaming ceramic mug of spiced hot chocolate. In his lap, his sketchbook lay open. Above our heads, the floating translucent text had begun to flicker, the luminous letters growing fainter and fainter, dissolving like morning mist in The Winter Sun. The original storyline has been completely overwritten. Male lead status. Terminated. Female lead status sovereign. Final audience rating, 10 out of 10. Look at them, they're so happy. Goodbye, Riley. Goodbye, Wyatt. Have a beautiful life. With a faint golden shimmer, the last line of text vanished into the air, leaving my vision completely clear, clean, unscripted, and entirely ours. I turned my head within the circle of Wyatt's arms, looking up into his face. His cheeks were flushed a soft, healthy pink from the radiator warmth, his hazel eyes clear and bright, reflecting the winter light from the courtyard outside. Wyatt, I whispered, reaching up to trace the clean, handsome line of his jawline with my thumb. The comments are gone. He tilted his head slightly, a soft, questioning curve touching his brow. He didn't know about the text in the air. He had never needed to. He only knew the girl who had held his hand in the dark and refused to let go. He set the mug down on the windowsill, picked up his pencil, and wrote on the blank corner of his sketchbook page. Does that mean we can write whatever we want now? Yes, I smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck, pulling his face down toward mine. Starting right now. Wyatt didn't reach for the pen again. He leaned in, his lips meeting mine with a slow, deep, breathtaking tenderness that held no hesitation, no fear, and no apology. His hands tangled into my hair, pulling me flush against his chest, his heartbeat hammering against mine. In a wild, steady, triumphant rhythm. Outside the glass, the snow fell softly over the world, covering every old track, every ancient grievance, and every broken rule, leaving only a wide, white, infinite road stretching out toward the morning sun.